You already know what you need to do. That's the part nobody talks about. It's not that you lack information. It's not that you haven't read enough books or watched enough videos. Deep down, in that quiet place you rarely visit, you already know. And that knowing, that gap between what you know and what you actually do, is where your entire life is being decided right now. Think about the last time you told yourself, "I'll start Monday." Think about the version of yourself you keep promising to become. Think about the dreams you've quietly shelved because life got loud. That's not laziness. That's not weakness. That's a missing framework. And that's exactly what this is about. What you're about to read isn't motivation that fades by Thursday. These are 20 lessons, hard-won, science-backed, and deeply human, that once they land inside you, they don't leave. They rewire how you think, how you choose, and who you become. Most people will read a few of these and nod. Don't be that person. Read every single one like it was written specifically for you, because it was. Chapter 1, The Power of Choosing. Later over now. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you chose the harder thing? Not because someone was watching, not because you had to, but because you understood what it would cost you not to? That moment of choosing, that's where everything begins. There's a principle that quietly separates people who build lives they're proud of from people who spend years wondering why nothing seems to change. It's not intelligence. It's not connections. It's not even hard work in the traditional sense. It's the ability to look at something you want right now, comfort, pleasure, ease, and consciously decide to wait. Psychologists call it delayed gratification. But I want you to think of it differently. Think of it as voting for your future self. Every time you skip the workout, you cast a vote against the person you're trying to become. Every time you stay up scrolling instead of sleeping, you cast a vote against your energy, your clarity, your next day. But every time you do the hard thing when the easy thing is right there in front of you, you're casting a vote for someone worth becoming. In the 1960s, a team of researchers at a university ran a study that would end up being referenced in almost every serious conversation about human success. They sat children down, one at a time, and placed a single sweet treat in front of them. The deal was simple: eat it now or wait 15 minutes and get 2. Then they walked out of the room. What happened next was fascinating, not because of what the children did with the treat, but because of how they handled the wait. The children who eventually got the second treat didn't simply have more willpower, they had strategies. They covered their eyes. They sang to themselves. They turned their chair away from the table. They weren't fighting desire. They were redirecting attention. That's the real lesson. Delayed gratification isn't a battle of willpower. It's a battle of focus. Your brain has 2 powerful systems running simultaneously. One is ancient, fast, and emotional. It wants relief, reward, and pleasure immediately. The other is slower, rational, and forward-thinking. It understands consequences, timelines, and trade-offs. The ancient part is loud. The rational part requires effort to hear. Most people live almost entirely on autopilot from the first system. They buy things that give them a hit of excitement. They avoid conversations that might be uncomfortable. They eat what tastes good rather than what fuels them. And then they look up after 5 or 10 years and feel a creeping sense that life somehow passed them by. Here's what I want you to try this week, not this year, not someday. this week. When you're about to make an impulsive decision, any decision, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. How will I feel about this in 10 minutes? How will I feel about this in 10 months? How will I feel about this in 10 years? That's it. 3 questions. 10, 10, 10. This tiny pause does something remarkable. It wakes up the rational part of your brain. It creates just enough space between impulse and action for you to make a choice you'll actually respect yourself for. And here's something most people miss about delayed gratification. It gets easier with practice. Not easier in the sense that desire disappears, but easier in the sense that your brain literally rewires itself. Every time you choose the long-term benefit, you're strengthening a neural pathway. You're building a self-image as someone who follows through. And that self-image starts doing the heavy lifting for you. The people who seem to have extraordinary discipline aren't fighting harder battles than you. They've just had more practice. And somewhere along the way, they fell in love with who they were becoming. The question isn't whether you can delay gratification. You've done it before. You've waited for something you really wanted. You've pushed through discomfort. You have the capacity. The question is whether you'll choose to use it today, not someday. Because the version of you that's possible, the one with the energy, the focus, the follow-through, isn't waiting for a perfect moment. That version is built one small decision at a time, starting with the next one you make. Chapter 2. Master Your Inner Voice. Here's something that might make you uncomfortable. Right now, as you read this, there's a voice in your head. You can hear it. It's the same voice that told you this morning whether today was going to be a good day or a hard one. It's the voice that whispered, "You're not ready," the last time an opportunity showed up. It's the voice that replays conversations from 3 years ago at 2 in the morning. That voice is not your enemy. But if you've never learned to manage it, it's probably been quietly running and often ruining your life. Here's the number that changes everything. Researchers estimate that you have somewhere between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts per day. The staggering part. For most people, the vast majority of those thoughts are both repetitive and negative. Same fears, same doubts, same stories. Playing on a loop day after day, year after year. And here's what makes this so critical. Your inner voice doesn't just reflect your reality. It creates it. The way you talk to yourself determines what you attempt, what you avoid, what you believe is possible for you, and ultimately, what kind of life you build. It's the most influential conversation you will ever have, and most people are completely unconscious of it. Think about a person you know who seems to move through life with confidence. Someone who takes risks, recovers from setbacks quickly, and seems to believe in themselves even when things go sideways. Now think about someone you know who always seems to be one step away from defeat. Someone who quits early, catastrophizes small problems, and talks themselves out of opportunities before they even try. The gap between those two people is not talent. It's not luck. It's not circumstances. It's the story they tell themselves every single day. So let's talk about the most common traps. The thought patterns that are quietly draining your potential without you even realizing it. The first trap is catastrophic thinking. This is when your brain sprints directly to the worst possible outcome. You send an email and don't get a response by end of day, and your mind tells you that you've offended someone, damaged the relationship, or are about to lose your job. You feel a twinge of physical discomfort, and your brain starts diagnosing rare diseases. You make one mistake in a meeting, and your inner voice declares you incompetent. Catastrophic thinking isn't just unpleasant, it's expensive. It costs you sleep, focus, relationships, and courage. And the cruelest part? The disaster almost never actually happens. The second trap is all or nothing thinking. You eat one meal that wasn't on your plan and your brain says the whole week is ruined. You miss one workout and your inner voice tells you you're back to square one. You have one difficult day at work and suddenly your inner narrator is writing a story about how you're failing at everything. This binary lens, perfect or worthless, winning or losing, all or nothing, is one of the most creativity-killing, motivation-destroying mental habits a person can have. Life doesn't exist in black and white, and neither does progress. The third trap is personalization. This is when you make other people's behavior about you, even when it has nothing to do with you. Someone seems distracted in a conversation, and you assume you've said something wrong. A colleague is short with you, and your brain immediately begins a trial in which you are both defendant and judge. A friend cancels plans, and suddenly you're wondering what you did. The truth? Most of the time, other people are consumed by their own interior world, their own fears, their own pressures, their own inner voice. You are rarely the main character in someone else's bad day. The fourth trap is mind reading, assuming you know what others think of you, assuming the room judged your presentation harshly, assuming your idea was dismissed before you even shared it. This trap is particularly dangerous because it causes you to self-censor, to shrink, to hold back, all based on a story you made up entirely in your own mind. Now, what do you actually do about all of this? Step one is awareness. You cannot change a pattern you haven't noticed. Start paying attention to your inner voice like you would pay attention to a friend who's been behaving strangely. Not with judgment, just with curiosity. What is it actually saying? What tone does it use? When does it get loudest? Step two is challenge. When a negative thought appears, don't accept it as fact. Cross-examine it. Ask, is this actually true? What evidence do I have for this? What evidence do I have against it? Is this thought helping me or harming me right now? Most of the time, you'll find that the thought is a feeling wearing the costume of a fact. Step three is replacement. But do it honestly. Don't try to plaster false positivity over real doubt. If you're struggling financially and you tell yourself, I'm wealthy, your brain will reject it immediately because it knows it's a lie. But I'm learning how to build financial stability that your brain can work with. The goal is to find thoughts that are both more empowering and believable. Step four is the quality of your questions. The questions you ask yourself are profoundly powerful because your brain is wired to answer them. Ask, why does this always happen to me? And your brain will search for evidence that you're cursed. Ask, what can I learn from this? And your brain will search for growth. Ask, why am I so bad at this? And your brain will build a case. Ask, how can I get better at this? And your brain will start solving. Upgrade your questions. Upgrade your life. Step five is self-compassion. And this one is underrated almost everywhere. When you make a mistake, when you fall short, when life knocks you sideways, talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you genuinely care about. Not with excuses, not with sugarcoating, but with the kind of honest, warm, constructive voice you would use with a close friend going through the same thing. You deserve that voice, not someday, now. Your inner dialogue is the operating system running beneath everything else in your life. You can change your habits, your environment, your routines, but if the voice inside your head is still telling you that you're not enough, not ready, not capable, you'll keep hitting the same invisible ceiling. Master the voice and watch the ceiling disappear. Chapter 3. The Art of Strategic No. There's a word that could change your life faster than almost any habit, any routine, or any morning ritual. It's 2 letters, 1 syllable. And most people are absolutely terrified of it. No, not the apologetic no. Not the let me check my schedule. No, that's really a yes with a delay. Not the no that comes wrapped in 17 explanations and 3 alternative offers. The clean, clear, confident no. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what you're saying yes to instead. Here's the truth that nobody tells you when you're young and eager and trying to prove yourself. Every single yes you say is a no to something else. Every time you say yes to a commitment that doesn't align with where you're going, you are saying no to the work, the rest, the relationship, or the opportunity that actually matters. You just don't see that second no because it's invisible. Most people build their lives around visible commitments and invisible costs. They say yes to the meeting, the favor, the project, the invitation, and they say no to deep focus, personal growth, meaningful connection, and their own dreams. Not because they chose to, but because they never stopped to do the math. Let's do the math right now. Imagine you say yes to 1 extra weekly commitment, something that takes about 2 hours including travel and follow-up. That's 2 hours per week. 52 weeks in a year. That's 104 hours per year spent on something that wasn't your priority. That's more than 4 full days gone every single year. Now multiply that across 5 or 6 commitments that don't really align with your goals. You don't have a time problem. You have a boundaries problem. The most focused, most productive, most genuinely successful people you admire are not successful because they said yes to more things. They are successful because they had the courage and the clarity to say no to almost everything so they could say a full, wholehearted, undivided yes to the few things that mattered most. A legendary investor once described his personal decision-making process like this. He would write down the 25 most important things he wanted to accomplish. Then he would circle the top 5. Those 5 became his relentless focus. But here's what made his framework remarkable. The remaining 20 didn't become a secondary list. They became his avoid at all costs list. Because he knew that the biggest threat to great work isn't bad opportunities. It's good opportunities that distract you from great ones. Read that again. The enemy of great is not bad. The enemy of great is good. So why is saying no so hard? Because we are wired, deeply evolutionarily wired, to seek approval and avoid rejection. Saying no feels like disappointing someone. It feels like closing a door. It feels, in the moment, like loss. And your brain treats that feeling of social disapproval like a genuine threat. But here's what. You're not calculating in that moment the cost of saying yes, the stress, the resentment, the diluted attention, the slow erosion of your own priorities. The quiet voice inside you that keeps asking, when is it my turn? Saying no strategically is not selfish. It is the most responsible thing you can do. for your goals, for the people who depend on your best, and for the commitments you've already made. Here's how to build this skill practically. First, get ruthlessly clear on your priorities. Most people struggle to say no because they don't have a strong enough yes. When you know exactly where you're going, when you have a clear picture of the life you're building, then every request that comes your way either moves you toward that picture or away from it. The decision becomes almost automatic. Second, create a personal decision filter. Before committing to anything, run it through a set of honest questions. Does this align with my values? Does this move me toward my most important goals? Is this the best use of my time and energy right now? If you can't answer yes to at least two of those, the answer is no. Third, stop responding immediately. The impulse to answer on the spot is almost always driven by emotion. The desire to be helpful, to seem capable, to avoid awkwardness. Instead, build in a pause. Let me check what I have going on and get back to you. This simple buffer gives your rational mind time to catch up with your emotional reflex. Fourth, develop a set of clean, kind, firm responses. You don't need elaborate explanations. In fact, the longer your explanation, the more it sounds like a negotiation. Try. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not able to take that on right now. Or, that's not something I can commit to this season. Or simply, I have to decline, but I hope you find exactly the right person for it. Polite, clear. No opening for debate. Fifth, practice on small things first. Saying no is a muscle. And like any muscle, it needs progressive training. Start with low-stakes situations, the optional meeting, the favor that would genuinely inconvenience you, the social invitation you'd attend out of obligation rather than desire. Each small no strengthens your capacity for the big ones. Sixth, watch out for manipulation disguised as flattery. You're the only one who can do this. Everyone's counting on you. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. These are emotional levers, and they work precisely because they're designed to bypass your rational thinking and trigger your need for approval. When you recognize the pattern, you can respond from strategy instead of instinct. Here's the deeper truth about all of this. The people who truly respect you will respect your no. They may be briefly disappointed. That's human and normal. But they will respect you for it. The people who push back hard, who guilt trip, who make your no about their feelings, those are exactly the people whose requests you most need to decline. Your no is a declaration. It says, I know where I'm going. I know what matters. I know what I'm worth. And I'm not willing to trade my future for your comfort. That's not cold. That's not selfish. That's someone who's finally decided to take their own life seriously. Start today. Find one thing on your list that you said yes to out of obligation, fear, or guilt. Something that genuinely doesn't align with your priorities. And give yourself permission to let it go. That space you create, that's where your real life has been waiting. Chapter 4. Compound your habits, not just your money. Everyone understands compound interest when it comes to money. You put a little in, leave it alone, let time do its work, and eventually, almost magically, the numbers start growing faster than you can track. A small investment made consistently over decades becomes something extraordinary, not because of one dramatic deposit, because of patience, repetition, and time. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Your habits compound in exactly the same way. Every single day, The small things you do or don't do are either quietly building the life you want or quietly dismantling it. There's no neutral. There's no standing still. Every habit is either an investment or a withdrawal, and the interest compounds in both directions. The morning you choose to move your body instead of hitting snooze, that's a deposit. The evening you choose to read instead of scroll, that's a deposit. The moment you choose a conversation over isolation, growth over comfort, discipline over impulse, deposit, deposit, deposit. And the reverse is equally true. The daily habits that seem harmless, the midday distraction that stretches into an hour, the nightly routine that consistently steals your sleep, the small avoidances that add up to a life half lived, those are withdrawals, and they compound too. Here's the number that should stop you in your tracks. If you get just 1% better every single day for 1 year, you end up approximately 37 times better than when you started. Not 37% better, 37 times better. But if you get 1% worse every day for the same year, you decline to nearly zero. The difference between those two trajectories isn't dramatic daily action. It's tiny daily choices. Now, here's where most people get this completely wrong. They focus on outcomes instead of identity. They want to lose weight instead of becoming someone who moves their body joyfully. They want to write a book instead of becoming someone who writes every day. They want to build financial security instead of becoming someone who handles money with intention. And so they chase the destination while neglecting the person they need to become to actually get there and stay there. Outcomes are lagging indicators. They're the echo of your habits, not the cause of them. If you want different results, you have to become a different person. And you become a different person one repeated choice at a time. So how do you actually build habits that stick? Habits that compound into something remarkable over months and years? Principle 1. Start embarrassingly small. This is where almost everyone fails. They get inspired, they get motivated, and they try to overhaul everything at once. New diet, new workout routine, new morning ritual, new evening wind down, new journaling practice, all starting Monday. And by Wednesday, life has happened, willpower has run out, and the whole thing collapses under its own weight. Here's a better approach. Want to start exercising? Begin with 5 minutes. Want to start reading? Begin with 2 pages. Want to start meditating? Begin with 60 seconds. This isn't about getting results from the habit itself, not yet. It's about building the identity. It's about becoming the kind of person who does this thing consistently without drama. Once that identity is established, once your brain starts to see this as just part of who you are, then you can gradually increase the intensity. But the foundation has to come first. Principle 2. Habit stacking. Your brain already has deeply grooved pathways for your existing habits. You brush your teeth. You pour your morning drink. You sit at your desk. You put on your shoes. These are automatic. They require almost no mental energy. The smartest thing you can do with a new habit is attach it to one of these existing anchors. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write 3 things I'm grateful for. After I sit at my desk, I will write down my 3 most important tasks before opening anything else. After I put on my workout shoes, I will do at least 10 minutes of movement. No excuses, no negotiation. The specificity matters enormously. Vague intentions evaporate. Specific triggers activate. Tell your brain exactly when and where the habit happens, and it will start to expect it. Principle 3. Design your environment before you need willpower. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Your environment is more powerful than your motivation every single time. If junk food is in your kitchen, you will eventually eat it. If your phone is on your nightstand, you will eventually check it at midnight. If your running shoes are buried in the closet, you will eventually skip the run. Stop relying on willpower. Willpower is a finite resource that gets depleted by stress, decision fatigue, and the general demands of a full life. Instead, design your environment so that good choices are the easy choices and poor choices require extra effort. Put the book on your pillow. Put the water bottle on your desk. Put your workout clothes where you'll see them first thing. Remove the apps that drain you. Log out of the platforms that pull you into comparison and distraction. Make the good path obvious and the bad path inconvenient. This isn't weakness. This is wisdom. Principle 4. Make good habits immediately rewarding. Your brain is wired to repeat behaviors that feel good right now. The problem with most good habits is that their rewards are delayed, sometimes by weeks, months, or years. The problem with most bad habits is that their rewards are immediate. This asymmetry is why change is hard. The solution is to create immediate satisfaction around your good habits. After you exercise, don't just think about your future health. Notice how good you feel right now. The energy, the clarity, the quiet pride. After you choose the nourishing meal, savor it. After you finish the work session without distraction, genuinely celebrate that. You can also use what some researchers call temptation bundling, pairing something you love with something you're building. Only listen to your favorite playlist during your workout. Only watch a show you enjoy while doing something productive around the house. Only visit your favorite cafe when you're working on something that matters. Pleasure becomes the reward for the habit, not the escape from it. Principle 5. Never miss twice. You will miss days. Life will interrupt. You'll get sick, travel, face unexpected demands, or simply have a day where everything falls apart. That's not failure. That's being human. The rule isn't never miss. The rule is never miss twice. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the beginning of a new pattern. The moment you miss a day, your only job is to make sure tomorrow happens. Not perfectly, just consistently. Show up, even if it's at 10% of your usual effort, because 10% maintained is infinitely more powerful than 0% repeated. The most consistent people in the world aren't the ones who never stumble. They're the ones who get back up faster than everyone else. Principle 6. Track the behavior, not just the result. Get a simple calendar. Mark an X every day you follow through on your habit. After a few weeks, you'll have a chain, a visual record of your consistency. And something interesting happens. You won't want to break the chain, not because of pride, because you'll start to see yourself differently. You'll start to see someone who follows through. That identity shift, that's the compound interest of habits doing its work. Here's what I want you to hold on to from this chapter. You don't need to be dramatically different to have a dramatically different life. You just need to be slightly better, slightly more consistent, slightly more intentional. Every day, not some days. Every day. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not filled with grand gestures. It's filled with small, repeated, unglamorous actions that most people underestimate because they don't look impressive in the moment. But time reveals everything. And a year from now, 5 years from now, the person who chose consistency over intensity, deposit after quiet deposit, will be living in a world the impatient version of themselves couldn't even imagine. Start your chain today, even if it's just one link. Chapter 5. The 80-20 Rule, applied to everything. Let me paint a picture you might recognize. You finish a full day of work, emails answered, meetings attended, tasks checked off, messages replied to, and you collapse into your evening feeling simultaneously exhausted and strangely unaccomplished. Like you were busy all day but somehow didn't move forward, like you ran hard but didn't get anywhere. That feeling has a name, and it's not laziness, it's not disorganization, it's not even poor time management. It's what happens when you haven't identified your vital few. In the late 1800s, an Italian economist noticed something peculiar about wealth distribution in his country. Roughly 80% of the land was owned by about 20% of the population. Curious, he began looking for this pattern elsewhere. In his garden, in business records, in agricultural data, and he found it everywhere. 80% of the peas in his garden came from 20% of the pods. 80% of outcomes consistently trace back to 20% of causes. This became known as the Pareto principle, or more commonly, the 80-20 rule. And once you truly see it, you cannot unsee it. It's everywhere. In your work, your relationships, your health, your finances, your learning, everywhere. But here's the part that matters most. This isn't just an interesting observation. It's a roadmap. If 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, then the most important question you can ask yourself is not, how do I do more? It's, which 20% is actually driving everything? Because once you identify that vital 20%, you have a choice. You can protect it, prioritize it, and pour your best energy into it, or you can keep doing what most people do, spreading yourself thin across 100 tasks, giving everything mediocre attention, and wondering why progress feels so slow. Let's make this real and personal. In your career, think honestly about your work over the last month. Which activities, conversations, or decisions actually moved things forward in a meaningful way? Which created real value? The kind that others noticed? The kind that advanced your goals? For most people in most roles, if they're ruthlessly honest, it comes down to a handful of things, a few key relationships, a few core responsibilities, a few decisions that actually mattered. Everything else, the reactive emails, the low-stakes meetings, the administrative busy work, was the 80% that produced 20% of the value, maybe less. This doesn't mean those things don't need to happen. It means they shouldn't be getting your best hours and your sharpest attention in your learning. Here's one that changes how you approach growth entirely. In almost any skill you want to develop, 80% of your practical capability will come from 20% of the knowledge. Learning a new language? A core vocabulary of roughly 1,000 words covers the vast majority of everyday conversation. Learning an instrument? A handful of foundational techniques underpin the majority of music you'll ever want to play. Learning to cook? Master a few fundamental methods, and you can make almost anything. Most people try to learn everything before they feel competent. The 80-20 thinker asks, what's the 20% I need to master first to get 80% of the results? Then they go deep on that and become genuinely capable far faster than the person who's trying to learn everything simultaneously. In your relationships, this one requires honesty and a little courage. Think about the relationships in your life that genuinely energize you. The people who challenge you, support you, believe in you, make you better. Now think about the relationships that consistently drain you. The ones that feel heavy, obligatory, one-sided, or negative. The 80-20 rule suggests that roughly 20% of your relationships produce 80% of your joy, growth, and genuine connection. Yet most people spread their relational energy so thin, trying to maintain dozens of surface-level connections, that they never go deep enough with anyone to experience real belonging. You don't need more relationships. You need deeper ones, with fewer, better people. In your health, the fundamentals, adequate sleep, regular movement, whole food nutrition, stress management, account for the vast majority of your health outcomes, not the supplements, not the optimization hacks, not the complicated protocols, the boring, consistent basics that most people chronically underdo. Before you chase the 20% refinements, ask yourself honestly whether you've mastered the 80% fundamentals. Most people haven't, and no amount of sophisticated optimization compensates for consistently poor sleep and chronic stress. In your finances, the core principles of wealth building are genuinely simple. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference consistently. Avoid high-interest debt. Give your investments time. That's the vital 20% that drives 80% of financial outcomes for ordinary people who build extraordinary security over time. Yet the financial industry profits from convincing you that wealth building is complicated, that you need dozens of strategies, complex instruments, and constant active management. For most people, that complexity is noise drowning out the signal. Now, here's the hardest part of applying the 80-20 rule. It's not identifying your vital 20%. That's actually not that difficult once you start paying attention. The hard part is eliminating, or at least radically minimizing, the other 80%. This requires something most people find deeply uncomfortable: the willingness to disappoint, to leave things undone that other people think should be done, to say no to good opportunities because you're protecting space for great ones, to be strategically incomplete rather than comprehensively mediocre. The 80-20 rule is not permission to be lazy. It is permission to be focused. And focus, real, deep, sustained focus on the things that actually matter, is perhaps the rarest and most valuable resource in the modern world. Here's a practical exercise. This week, at the end of each day, ask yourself one question. What were the one or two things I did today that actually moved the needle? Write them down. After 5 days, look at your list. You'll start to see patterns. You'll start to see your vital few emerging from the noise. Then ask yourself a harder question. How much of my time and energy is actually going to those things? For most people, the answer is sobering. The activities that matter most are getting the scraps, the leftover hours, the tired attention, the fragmented focus, while the activities that matter least are getting prime time. Flip that. Protect your vital few with everything you have. Schedule them first. Give them your sharpest hours. Build walls around them, and then, gently, strategically, without guilt, let the rest take care of itself. Because a life of focused excellence in a few things will always outperform a life of scattered adequacy in many. Always. Chapter 6. Your network is your net worth, but not how you think. Picture this scene. You're at a professional event, the kind with name badges and lukewarm coffee and people scanning the room while pretending to listen to whoever's talking to them. Someone walks up, shakes your hand with practiced enthusiasm, gives you their card, talks about themselves for 4 minutes, asks what you do, half listens to the answer, and then excuses themselves to go repeat the process with someone more strategically useful. You've met this person. You might have been this person, and you walked away feeling vaguely hollow, like something that was supposed to be meaningful was actually just transactional theater. That experience, that hollow feeling, is networking done wrong. And unfortunately, it's how most people understand the concept entirely. When people hear, your network is your net worth, they picture exactly that scene. They picture collecting contacts like trading cards, accumulating LinkedIn connections like digital trophies, showing up to events, and performing relatability. They think networking is a numbers game. The more people you know, the more valuable your network. But that's not how any of this actually works. Real networking isn't about who you know, it's about who genuinely knows you and why. Think about the meaningful opportunities that have shown up in your life. The job that came through a conversation, the introduction that opened a door you didn't even know existed, the advice that shifted your entire perspective at exactly the right moment. Now trace those back. Were they the result of a business card exchange at a conference? Or were they the result of a real relationship, one built on trust, genuine interest, and mutual investment over time? Almost always it's the latter. The most connected people in the world, the ones whose networks genuinely accelerate their lives, didn't build those networks by networking. They built them by being genuinely interested in other people and relentlessly generous with what they had to offer. This is the principle at the heart of everything. Give first, always without keeping score. When you meet someone, your first thought should not be, what can this person do for me? Your first thought should be, what can I offer this person? It might be an introduction to someone who could help them. It might be a resource, an insight, a perspective, a kind word at the right moment. It might simply be your genuine, unhurried attention, which is rarer and more valuable than most people realize. This isn't naive altruism. It's deeply strategic, because it's based on one of the most powerful principles in human psychology: reciprocity. When you genuinely help someone without expecting anything in return, something remarkable happens. They want to help you back, not out of obligation, out of genuine warmth, because you've established yourself as someone who adds value rather than extracts it. And that reputation, that identity as someone who gives, spreads. It becomes how people describe you when your name comes up in conversations you're not in the room for. Think about that for a moment. Your network is working for you or against you in rooms you will never see. People are mentioning your name, describing your character, recommending or not recommending you, based entirely on the impression you've left through your interactions. The question is, what are they saying? Here's another piece of this that most people completely overlook. You should be building relationships before you need them. Most people only reach out when they need something. They disappear for months or years and then resurface with a request. And the people on the receiving end of that pattern notice. even if they never say so. It feels transactional. It feels like being remembered only when you're useful. The most powerful networkers stay in consistent, low-pressure contact, not through mass newsletters or generic check-ins, but through genuine, specific, thoughtful moments, sharing something relevant to a specific person's interests, remembering something important in their life and following up, celebrating their wins publicly, showing up for them before they ask. These small gestures accumulate into something profound: trust. And trust is the true currency of every meaningful relationship. Now let's talk about who you're building relationships with, because this matters more than most people acknowledge. Most people focus exclusively upward. They want access to people more successful, more connected, more influential than they are. And while those relationships are valuable, this tunnel vision causes you to miss something crucial. The person sitting across from you today, regardless of their current title or circumstances, may become the most important connection of your life in 5 years. The junior colleague who seems unremarkable right now might found a company that changes an industry. The peer from a completely different field might introduce you to an opportunity you couldn't have imagined. The person serving you at a local business might have a network, a perspective, or an insight that shifts something for you. Treat every person as if they matter, not as a strategy, because they actually do. Quality will always outperform quantity in your network. 10 deep, genuine, mutually invested relationships will create more opportunity, more joy, and more support than 500 surface-level connections. Deep relationships require time, attention, and consistent investment. If you spread those resources across too many people, none of your relationships ever reach the depth where real trust and real magic happens. Be ruthlessly selective about where you invest your relational energy, and then invest deeply, generously, and consistently. One of the most powerful things you can do for your network, and one of the most overlooked, is to become a connector. When you introduce two people in your network who could genuinely help each other, something remarkable happens. Both of them feel grateful to you. Both of them see you as someone who makes things happen for others. And you become a hub, a central node, rather than just another point in the network. People think of hubs when opportunities arise. People think of givers when they have something valuable to share. Position yourself as both. Follow up consistently, but authentically. After meeting someone meaningful, reach out within a day or two. Reference something specific from your conversation that shows you were genuinely present. Then stay in occasional genuine contact. Not every week, not with mass messages, but enough that your relationship has a pulse, that it's alive and warm rather than dormant and cold. And finally, perhaps most importantly, show up for people during their difficult moments. Anyone can celebrate with someone during their wins. The person who reaches out during the struggle, who checks in during the hard season, who offers support when there's nothing obvious to gain, that person becomes irreplaceable. That person earns a kind of loyalty that no amount of strategic networking can manufacture. Your network is your net worth, but not because of what you can extract from it, because of who you become in the process of genuinely building it. Be the person people are glad they know. Be the person whose name, when it comes up in a room you're not in, makes people lean forward and say, "Oh, I know them. Let me tell you about them." That reputation, built quietly over years through consistent generosity, that's the most valuable professional asset you will ever own. Chapter 7. Emotional intelligence is your superpower. Think about the smartest person you've ever known. Not the most successful, not the happiest, not the most admired or the most effective in a room full of people. Just the smartest. The highest raw intellectual horsepower you've personally encountered. Now ask yourself honestly, are they the most successful person you know? Are they the one who seems to navigate life with the most grace, build the deepest relationships, lead others most effectively, recover from setbacks most resiliently? Probably not. And that gap between raw intelligence and actual life effectiveness is one of the most important things you will ever understand about yourself and the people around you, because what fills that gap, what determines whether intelligence becomes impact, whether potential becomes reality, whether knowledge becomes results, is emotional intelligence, not IQ, EQ. Decades of research now point to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Emotional intelligence is a stronger predictor of success in career, relationships, leadership, and overall life satisfaction than cognitive intelligence. People with high emotional intelligence earn more, lead better, recover faster, connect more deeply, and report higher levels of genuine fulfillment. And here's the part that should genuinely excite you. Unlike IQ, which is largely fixed, emotional intelligence can be deliberately developed at any age. Every conversation you have is practice. Every difficult moment is a training ground. Every relationship is a classroom. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? Let's break it down into its 4 core components, because understanding the map is the first step to navigating the territory. The first component is self-awareness. This is the foundation everything else is built on. Self-awareness is your ability to recognize what you're feeling in real time, to notice your emotional state as it's happening, rather than being swept along by it unconsciously. Most people have almost no idea what they're actually feeling in a given moment. They know when they're furious or ecstatic because those emotions are loud. But the subtle stuff, the low-grade anxiety that's making them short with people they love, the quiet resentment that's affecting their motivation, the underlying fear that's disguising itself as procrastination, that goes unnoticed. And what goes unnoticed goes unmanaged. Start building self-awareness through a simple practice, the emotional check-in. Several times throughout your day, morning, midday, evening, pause for 30 seconds and ask yourself 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? What triggered this feeling? How is this feeling affecting my thinking and behavior? That's it. 30 seconds, 3 questions, several times a day. Over weeks and months, this practice creates something invaluable: space between stimulus and response. The ability to notice what's happening inside you before it controls what happens outside you. The second component is self-management. Self-awareness tells you what you're feeling. Self-management determines what you do with that feeling. This is not about suppression. Suppressing emotions doesn't make them disappear. It makes them go underground, where they influence your behavior in ways you can't see or control. Self-management is about choosing your response rather than being hijacked by your reaction. The key tool here is the pause. Between any trigger and your response, there exists a moment, sometimes just a few seconds, where you have a choice. Most people never access that moment because they react so quickly it's already over before they realize what happened. But with practice, you can learn to find that moment and use it. When you feel the heat of frustration rising in a conversation, pause. When an email lands in your inbox that triggers immediate defensiveness, pause before you reply. When a situation activates your anxiety or your anger, pause, breathe, and ask, what response here actually serves me and the situation? The other crucial self-management skill is reframing. Your emotional response to any situation is largely determined not by the situation itself, but by how you interpret it. The same event, a critical piece of feedback, an unexpected change, a relationship tension, can devastate one person and motivate another. The difference is almost entirely in the frame. When something difficult happens, ask yourself, what's another way to see this? What might this be making possible that wasn't possible before? What would I need to believe about this situation to feel empowered rather than victimized by it? Reframing is not denial. It's not toxic positivity. It's the deliberate choice to find the interpretation that serves your growth and your response, without pretending the difficulty isn't real. The third component is social awareness. If self-awareness is about reading yourself, social awareness is about reading the room. It's your ability to pick up on the emotional information constantly being broadcast by the people around you, not just through their words, but through their tone, their body language, their silences, the things they almost say but don't. It's noticing that someone in a meeting is disengaged, not because they're bored, but because they're anxious. It's sensing that a colleague's sharpness today isn't really about you. It's understanding the emotional undercurrent in a group dynamic before it surfaces as conflict. Most people are so occupied with their own internal experience, what they want to say next, how they're coming across, what they're worried about, that they miss enormous amounts of emotional information that's right in front of them. Developing social awareness starts with genuine curiosity about other people's inner experience, not as a strategy, as a genuine practice of asking, what is this person actually feeling right now? What might they need in this moment that they're not directly asking for? What's the emotional subtext of what they're saying? When you start asking those questions consistently, you start noticing things you previously walked right past. And those things, those subtle emotional signals, contain some of the most important information available to you in any human interaction. The fourth component is relationship management. This is where everything comes together, where your self-awareness, your self-management, and your social awareness combine into the ability to navigate interactions in ways that build trust, resolve conflict, inspire others, and create genuine connection. Relationship management is what allows you to deliver difficult feedback in a way that's received rather than rejected. It's what allows you to influence someone's thinking without making them feel manipulated. It's what allows you to walk into a tense situation and help everyone in the room feel safer rather than more defensive. One of the most powerful relationship management skills is empathy. And I want to be specific about what real empathy actually is, because it's widely misunderstood. Empathy is not feeling sorry for someone. It's not sympathy from a comfortable distance. Empathy is the ability to genuinely step into someone else's emotional experience, to see the situation through their eyes, to feel what it might actually feel like to be them in this moment, and then to respond in a way that acknowledges that reality. When people feel truly understood, not just heard, but genuinely understood, something shifts. Walls come down. Defensiveness softens. Collaboration becomes possible where conflict seemed inevitable. Trust accelerates years ahead of where it would otherwise be. Empathy is the fastest trust-building tool that exists, and it costs nothing except the willingness to be genuinely present with another person. Another crucial relationship management skill is what researchers call emotional contagion management. The ability to be intentional about the emotional tone you bring into a room, rather than unconsciously absorbing whatever emotional tone is already there. Emotions spread. When you're around someone who's anxious, you start to feel anxious. When you're around someone who's calm and grounded, you start to regulate. When a leader walks into a room radiating quiet confidence, the whole team settles. When they walk in radiating panic, the whole team destabilizes. You are broadcasting an emotional signal in every interaction, whether you're aware of it or not. The question is whether you're broadcasting intentionally or by default. Emotionally intelligent people choose their emotional state deliberately and maintain it even when the environment is trying to pull them somewhere else. Finally, and this may be the most practically valuable thing in this entire chapter, emotional intelligence dramatically improves your ability to navigate conflict. Most conflicts are not fundamentally about facts, logic, or even the surface issue being debated. They're about emotions. Feeling dismissed, disrespected, misunderstood, or undervalued. When you address the emotional layer first, when you genuinely acknowledge how someone feels before trying to solve the practical problem, you remove the fuel from the fire, and suddenly resolution becomes possible. Validate the feeling, then address the issue. This sequence, practiced consistently, will transform your most difficult relationships and your most tense professional situations. Here's what I want you to remember as you move forward. Emotional intelligence is not a soft skill. It is the hard skill that makes every other skill more effective. It's the multiplier, the force behind the force. In a world where technical capabilities are increasingly automated, where information is infinitely available, where cognitive tasks are being handed to machines, the capacity to understand, connect with, and influence other human beings becomes not just valuable, but irreplaceable. Develop your EQ with the same seriousness you bring to developing any other capability. Practice self-awareness daily. Pause before you react. Read the room with genuine curiosity. Show up for people emotionally, not just logistically. Because the person who can do all of that, who can make others feel seen, heard, understood, and valued, will always have a place at every table that matters. Chapter 8. Think in decades, not days. Here's a question most people have never seriously sat with. Where do you want to be in 20 years? Not vaguely, not successful or happy or financially secure. Those are feelings, not destinations. I mean, specifically, concretely. What does your life actually look like 2 decades from now? What kind of work are you doing? Or have you stopped needing to work in the traditional sense? What do your closest relationships feel like? What kind of person have you become? In your character, your health, your wisdom, your contribution to the world around you? Most people have never genuinely answered that question. Not because they don't care about their future, but because they're so consumed by the immediate that the distant feels almost irrelevant. Today's problem, this week's deadline, this month's pressure, these things are loud and urgent and real. The 20-year version of your life is quiet, abstract, and easy to postpone, thinking about. And that postponement, that chronic prioritization of the urgent over the important, is one of the most expensive habits a person can have. Because here's what nobody tells you clearly enough. The quality of your life 20 years from now is being decided right now. Not in some dramatic, pivotal moment. In the ordinary, unremarkable choices you're making today. The habits you're building or neglecting. The skills you're developing or ignoring. The relationships you're investing in or taking for granted. The financial decisions you're making or avoiding. 20 years from now, you will be living in the house that today's choices are quietly building. The only question is what kind of house it will be. This is the essence of long-term thinking, and it's one of the most powerful cognitive shifts you can make. Not because it requires more intelligence, but because it requires a fundamentally different relationship with time. Short-term thinking keeps you competing on the same crowded battlefield as everyone else. When your horizon is this week or this quarter, you're fighting for the same opportunities, reacting to the same pressures, making the same compromises as every other short-term thinker around you. You're playing checkers on a board designed for chess. But when you extend your horizon to decades, you access strategies that are completely invisible to short-term thinkers. You can make investments in skills, relationships, health, and assets that don't pay off immediately, but compound dramatically over time. You can plant seeds that won't become trees for years. You can absorb short-term discomfort with genuine equanimity because you understand it in the context of a much longer arc. Let's make this practical across the areas of your life that matter most. In your career, the short-term thinker optimizes for the next paycheck or the next promotion. They make decisions based on what looks impressive right now, what pays the most immediately, what feels safe and certain in this moment. The long-term thinker asks different questions. What skills will be most valuable in 10 years? What reputation am I building through my daily behavior? What relationships am I cultivating that will open doors I can't even see yet? The short-term thinker often makes more money in year 1. The long-term thinker almost always wins by year 10. And it's not close. In your finances, compound interest is the clearest mathematical proof that long-term thinking creates exponential advantage. The person who begins investing modestly at 25 and maintains that habit consistently will almost always build more wealth than the person who waits until they have more money and then tries to catch up with larger contributions. Time is the engine. Patience is the fuel. And short-term thinking starves the engine before it can generate real power. In your health, every chronic health condition that devastates people in their 50s and 60s was built slowly, invisibly, through daily choices made in their 30s and 40s, or earlier. The extra weight added gradually. The sedentary patterns normalized over years. The chronic stress never properly addressed. The sleep consistently sacrificed. None of these feel catastrophic in the moment. Collectively, over decades they are. The long-term health thinker doesn't need to be perfect every day. They just need to be honest about the trajectory their daily choices are creating and whether that trajectory leads somewhere they actually want to go. In your relationships, short-term relationship thinking avoids difficult conversations because conflict feels bad right now. It prioritizes surface harmony over genuine depth. It takes good relationships for granted because they seem stable in the moment. Long-term relationship thinking understands that the depth of a connection 20 years from now is being built or eroded through thousands of small moments happening right now. Every conversation where you're truly present, every moment of repair after conflict, every time you choose the relationship over your own comfort. The relationships that sustain and enrich people across decades are not the ones that were always easy. They're the ones that were consistently chosen, even when choosing was inconvenient. Now, how do you actually develop this capacity for long-term thinking when everything around you is designed to keep you focused on right now? Start with a written 20-year vision. This is not a vague wish list. Sit down, genuinely sit down, with paper or a document, and describe in specific sensory detail what you want your life to look like 2 decades from now. Where are you? Who's with you? What does a typical day feel like? What have you built? What have you let go of? What kind of person have you become? The more specific and emotionally resonant this vision is, the more power it has to guide your daily decisions. Because once you have a clear destination, every choice becomes easier to evaluate. Does this move me toward that vision or away from it? Then work backwards. If that's where you want to be in 20 years, where do you need to be in 10? In 5? In 1? What needs to be true about your skills, your habits, your relationships, your finances, your health by each of those milestones? Map the terrain between here and there, not with rigid plans, but with directional clarity. Make decisions through a long-term lens. When you face a significant choice, add a single question to your evaluation. How will I feel about this decision in 10 years? This question is remarkably clarifying. It cuts through the noise of immediate pressure and emotional reactivity and connects you to your deeper values and longer-term interests. Develop genuine comfort with slow progress. This might be the hardest part of long-term thinking because we live in a culture that celebrates speed and visible momentum. But the most meaningful things, deep expertise, genuine wealth, strong character, lasting relationships, all develop slowly. They resist acceleration. They require patience that feels almost countercultural. When you're in a period of slow, invisible progress, when you're doing the right things consistently but can't yet see the results, long-term thinking is what keeps you from abandoning the process too soon. It's what allows you to trust that the seeds you're planting will eventually grow, even when the ground still looks bare. Learn to reframe setbacks through a long-term lens. Short-term thinkers experience setbacks as potential endings. Long-term thinkers experience setbacks as data points, information about what needs adjusting in a much longer experiment. A failed project isn't a verdict. A difficult year isn't a destiny. A painful loss isn't the end of the story. It's a chapter, and the story continues. This perspective doesn't minimize the pain of setbacks. It contextualizes them. And context changes everything. Here's what I find most powerful about long-term thinking. It's the great equalizer. You don't need exceptional talent or perfect circumstances or unusual luck to benefit from it. You just need to be willing to wait and to keep doing the right things while you wait. Most people won't. Most people will get impatient. Most people will abandon the long game when short-term pain exceeds short-term reward. Most people will let urgency crowd out importance. Let the immediate crowd out the significant. Let the loud crowd out the meaningful. That's your opportunity. While the short-term thinkers are scrambling for whatever's available right now, you're quietly, patiently, consistently building something that compounds, something that grows, something that 2 decades from now will look like overnight success to everyone who wasn't watching the whole time. Plant the seeds today. Trust the process. Think in decades and let time do what only time can do. Chapter 9. Failure is data, not defeat. Let me tell you about the moment most people quietly give up. It's not dramatic. There's no announcement, no formal decision, no clear line crossed. It happens in the small private aftermath of something that didn't work, a project that fell flat, a pitch that got rejected, a relationship that ended badly, a goal that slipped away despite genuine effort. And in that quiet aftermath, a story begins to form. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I was fooling myself. Maybe this is a sign. And that story, not the failure itself, but the meaning attached to it, is where most people's potential quietly goes to die. Here's what I want you to understand at the deepest level possible. Failure is not a verdict. It's data. It's feedback. It's the universe's most direct communication about what needs adjusting, what needs refining, what needs to be tried differently. Every failure contains information, valuable, specific, actionable information that success rarely provides with the same clarity. The problem isn't failure. The problem is what we've been taught to believe failure means. From childhood, most of us absorbed a story about failure that goes something like this. Failure means you weren't good enough. Failure means you made a mistake. Failure means you should have known better, tried harder, been smarter. Failure is something to be ashamed of, something to hide, minimize, or avoid at all costs. And so we build our lives around avoiding it. We choose the safe path over the meaningful one. We attempt only what we're already confident we can achieve. We stay in the comfortable lane, not because it leads where we want to go, but because at least we won't crash. And then we wonder why our lives feel smaller than we imagined they would. The fear of failure is almost always more limiting than failure itself. The crash you're trying to avoid rarely destroys you. The life lived in avoidance of the crash, the narrowed ambitions, the unrealized potential, the persistent wondering about what might have been. That's the real cost. Think about how you learned to walk. You fell hundreds of times, thousands of times if you count all the stumbles and near misses before your legs got strong enough to carry you reliably. But at no point in that process did you develop a belief that you were a failure at walking. At no point did you decide the falling was evidence that you weren't meant to be upright. You fell, your brain processed the information, your body adjusted, and you tried again. Each fall was a lesson with legs. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most people lose that relationship with falling. They start interpreting each fall as a statement about their worth rather than information about their approach. They start saying, "I'm not good at this," when what they mean is, "I haven't figured this out yet." And that subtle shift from approach to identity changes everything. When failure is about your approach, it's fixable. When failure is about your identity, it feels permanent. The most transformative shift you can make in your relationship with failure is to keep it firmly in the category of approach. This project didn't work. Let me understand why and adjust. This strategy didn't produce the results I wanted. Let me analyze what happened and try something different. This attempt didn't succeed. Let me extract every useful piece of information from the experience and use it to make the next attempt smarter. This is the mindset that separates people who eventually break through from people who stop just before the breakthrough. Here's something that should reframe how you think about experimentation and risk. The most successful people in any field don't fail less than everyone else. They fail more, not because they're worse at what they do, but because they attempt more. They run more experiments. They take more swings. They push further, beyond their current capabilities, more consistently than their less successful counterparts. Every significant innovation in history was preceded by a trail of failed attempts. Every mastery was built on a foundation of imperfect early practice. Every meaningful achievement carries the fingerprints of the failures that informed it. The entrepreneurs whose companies you admire, they have graveyards of failed initiatives behind their successes. Products that flopped, strategies that collapsed, partnerships that dissolved. The athletes whose performances you marvel at, they have thousands of hours of training sessions where nothing went right, where they were slow and clumsy and frustrated. The artists whose work moves you, they have drawers full of attempts they'll never show anyone. The failure is part of the process, not despite the success, because of it. So how do you actually change your relationship with failure? Not intellectually. Anyone can nod along with this idea. But practically, in the moments when it stings, when the rejection lands, when the thing you worked hard for doesn't work out. First, separate your identity from your results. Your worth as a human being is not determined by whether a particular project succeeded or failed. Your intelligence is not measured by whether your first attempt was perfect. Your potential is not limited by your past results. You are not your outcomes. You are the person having the outcomes, and that person can learn, adjust, and try again. Practice saying this to yourself in moments of failure. This attempt didn't work. I am not the attempt. Second, conduct what I call a failure debrief. Instead of moving past failure as quickly as possible, which is what most people do because failure is uncomfortable, sit with it long enough to extract its lessons. Ask yourself 4 questions. What actually happened? What worked, even partially? What didn't work, and why? What would I do differently with the information I now have? These 4 questions transform a painful experience into a strategic asset. They take the energy of frustration and redirect it toward growth. And over time, your collection of failure debriefs becomes one of the most valuable resources you own, a personalized manual for navigating your specific challenges and patterns. Third, fail fast and fail cheap wherever possible. This means designing your experiments, your attempts, your risks, so that you get feedback quickly and the downside of any single failure is manageable. Don't invest 5 years in testing an assumption you could test in 5 weeks. Don't bet everything on a single approach when you could test multiple approaches with smaller stakes. The goal is to generate learning as efficiently as possible, which means embracing small, fast failures rather than avoiding all risk in hopes of guaranteeing success. Fourth, distinguish between good failures and bad failures. A good failure is the result of a thoughtful risk, something you genuinely evaluated, prepared for, and attempted with sound reasoning. Even when it doesn't work, a good failure produces learning and builds capability. A bad failure is the result of negligence, avoidable ignorance, or repeating a pattern you already know doesn't work. Be compassionate with yourself about good failures. Be honest with yourself about bad ones. And do the work to stop repeating them. Fifth, normalize failure in your conversations. Most people hide their failures and perform their successes. This creates a social environment where everyone around you appears to be succeeding effortlessly, which makes your own failures feel even more isolating and shameful. When you start talking openly about what hasn't worked, what you've learned from it, what you're trying differently, two things happen. You free yourself from the performance, and you give everyone around you permission to do the same. Some of the most powerful conversations you will ever have will begin with, "I tried something and it didn't work. Here's what I learned." Finally, and this might be the most important thing in this entire chapter, understand that your biggest failures often arrive just before your most significant breakthroughs. There's a pattern that shows up again and again in the stories of people who achieve something remarkable. The hardest, most discouraging moment, the one where giving up felt most rational, came just before everything shifted, just before the strategy finally clicked, just before the right person appeared, just before the compound effect of all their previous effort became suddenly, dramatically visible. Most people quit in that moment, not because they're weak, but because they interpret the darkness as a sign that there's no dawn coming, rather than as evidence that the dawn is very close. When you're in your hardest moment, when failure feels like a verdict rather than a waypoint, remember this: the fact that it's hard doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Sometimes it means you're almost there. Keep going, extract the lesson, adjust the approach, and go again. Because the person who keeps getting up, not the one who never falls, but the one who always gets up, is the person who eventually arrives somewhere worth arriving. Chapter 10. Systems beat goals. Every time. Let me say something that might feel slightly heretical, given how much of the personal development world is built around goal setting. Goals are overrated, not useless, not worthless, but dramatically, consistently overrated, and the obsession with them is quietly sabotaging more people's progress than it's enabling. Here's the paradox that most goal-focused thinking misses entirely. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. A goal is a destination you want to reach. A system is the road you actually travel. And no matter how clearly you can see the destination, if the road you're walking every day doesn't lead there, you won't arrive. Goals tell you where you want to go. Systems determine whether you actually get there. Let me show you why this distinction matters so much more than most people realize. Imagine two people who both set the same goal. Run a half marathon 6 months from now. Same goal, same deadline, same starting point. The first person is goal-focused. They think about the finish line. They imagine crossing it. They tell people about it. They download a training app and feel motivated for about 10 days until work gets busy, the weather turns, motivation fades, and suddenly 6 months have passed, and the race is next weekend, and they are absolutely not ready. The second person is systems-focused. They don't think much about the finish line at all. Instead, they ask one question: what kind of person completes a half marathon, and what does that person do consistently? Then they build a system around that identity. 3 runs per week, non-negotiable, regardless of motivation or weather or how tired they feel, not because the goal demands it, because that's what this kind of person does. 6 months later, the first person is making excuses. The second person is crossing the finish line and thinking about what's next. The goal was identical. The system made all the difference. Here's why goals alone so often fail us. Goals create what I call the arrival fallacy, the belief that happiness, fulfillment, and success exist on the other side of achievement. You tell yourself that you'll feel good when you reach the goal. You'll be satisfied when you hit the number, finish the project, earn the recognition. But 2 things happen when you actually arrive. Either the achievement doesn't feel as significant as you imagined, because the bar has already quietly shifted, or you feel a brief surge of satisfaction followed by an emptiness that sends you scrambling for the next goal. Either way, you've spent months or years postponing your sense of fulfillment to a moment that either disappoints or disappears. Systems solve this problem elegantly. When you're focused on the system, on the process, on the daily practice, on the consistent execution of something meaningful, you can be successful right now. Every day you follow your system, you've won that day. You don't need to wait for the destination to feel the satisfaction of moving in the right direction. Goals also create a motivation problem that's worth understanding clearly. When you set a goal, motivation tends to be high at the beginning, the excitement of possibility, the energy of a fresh start. Then it fades. It always fades. Motivation is emotional, and emotions fluctuate. They respond to sleep quality, stress levels, the weather, what someone said to you this morning, how your last week went. If your behavior depends on motivation, your consistency will be as variable as your emotions. And variable consistency produces variable results, which is another way of saying not much progress. Systems remove motivation from the equation. When following your system is simply what you do, when it's as automatic as brushing your teeth or making your morning drink, you don't need to feel motivated to do it. You just do it, because that's who you are and what you do. Identity is the engine that systems run on, and this is the most important principle in this entire chapter. The most durable, most effective habits and systems are built not around outcomes, but around identity. Not, I want to run a half marathon, but I am a runner. Not, I want to write a book, but I am a writer. Not, I want to build financial security, but I am someone who handles money with intention and discipline. When your behavior is anchored to your identity rather than your goals, everything changes, because now every time you follow your system, you're not just making progress toward a goal. You're casting a vote for the person you believe yourself to be. And every vote makes that identity stronger, more real, more automatic. A runner runs even when they don't feel like running, because that's what runners do. A writer writes even when inspiration is absent, because that's what writers do. A disciplined saver invests even in months when money feels tight, because that's what financially intentional people do. The behavior follows the identity. Build the identity first. So how do you actually build systems that work? Systems that stick, that compound, that gradually reshape who you are? Start with the smallest viable version. Most people design systems that require peak motivation and perfect conditions to execute, which means the system works beautifully for about 2 weeks and then collapses the first time life gets complicated. Instead, design your system around your worst days, not your best ones. What's the minimum you can do to maintain the identity, even when you're exhausted, overwhelmed, or stretched thin? If your system requires 60 minutes on a good day, it should have a 10-minute version for hard days, because 10 minutes maintained across years will always outperform 60 minutes abandoned after 3 weeks. Design your environment to make the system effortless. The environment shapes behavior more reliably than willpower ever will. If you want to write every morning, have your document open before you go to sleep. If you want to exercise consistently, have your workout ready to go the moment you wake up. If you want to eat well, make sure your kitchen makes good choices easy and poor choices inconvenient. Stop relying on willpower to maintain your systems. Willpower is a depletable resource. Environmental design is a permanent infrastructure. Build the infrastructure. Create feedback loops that show you your consistency. Track your system, not your outcomes, your consistency. Mark the days you followed through. Watch the pattern accumulate. There's something deeply motivating about a visual record of your own consistency. It creates a momentum of its own, a reluctance to break the chain that becomes its own form of motivation. Stack your systems so they support each other. Look for places where two systems can share the same time block or reinforce the same identity. Exercise and learning can happen simultaneously through audio content. Social connection and physical health can overlap through a walking habit with someone you care about. Financial discipline and mindfulness can reinforce each other through a weekly money review that's also a reflection practice. When systems compound on each other, the returns multiply. Review and refine your systems regularly. A system that served you 6 months ago may not be what you need now. As you grow, as your circumstances evolve, your systems need to evolve with you. Schedule a monthly review, even just 20 minutes, to ask, what's working? What's not? What needs adjusting? What should I start, stop, or change? The system that gets you here is not necessarily the system that gets you there. Stay curious about your own process. Here's what I want you to carry from this chapter into everything that follows. Stop asking, what do I want to achieve? Start asking, what kind of person do I want to become, and what would that person do consistently? Then build a system around the answer. Start embarrassingly small, execute with embarrassing consistency, and trust that identity, built one repeated action at a time, will eventually produce outcomes that feel almost miraculous to the people who only saw the result and not the process. Your goals might give you direction, but your systems, your daily, consistent, identity-anchored systems, will determine your destination. Choose them carefully, protect them fiercely, execute them consistently, and let the compound effect of small, repeated actions do what it always does, quietly, patiently, inevitably. Build something extraordinary. Chapter 11, Manage Your Energy, Not Just Your Time. Here's a scenario I want you to sit with honestly. Two people, same 24 hours, same general responsibilities, same basic circumstances. One of them ends the day feeling like they moved mountains, clear, focused, productive, genuinely satisfied with what they created. The other ends the day feeling like they ran a marathon without moving an inch, exhausted, scattered, vaguely behind on everything, wondering where the hours went. Same time, completely different experience, completely different results. The difference isn't discipline, it isn't intelligence, it isn't even how they managed their schedule. It's how they manage their energy. We've built an entire culture around time management, calendars, productivity systems, time blocking, scheduling apps, efficiency frameworks, and time management matters. But it's missing the deeper variable that actually determines the quality of what happens inside each hour. Because here's the truth that changes everything. You cannot create more time, but you can dramatically change the quality of energy you bring to the time you have. A focused, energized hour produces more than 4 scattered, depleted hours. Every time, without exception. And yet most people are unconsciously managing their hours while completely ignoring their energy, and then wondering why, despite being busy all day, they feel like they accomplished so little of real value. Let's talk about what energy actually is, because most people think of it only in physical terms, and that's a significant blind spot. Your energy operates on 4 distinct levels simultaneously. Physical energy is your body's basic capacity for sustained activity, the foundation everything else rests on. Mental energy is your brain's ability to focus, think clearly, and process complexity. Emotional energy is your capacity to remain resilient, positive, and genuinely present with others. And purposeful energy, sometimes called spiritual energy, though it has nothing to do with religion, is the deep fuel that comes from feeling connected to something meaningful, from knowing that your work and your life actually matter. Most people manage only their physical energy, and even that, they manage poorly. They drink stimulants to mask fatigue instead of addressing its root causes. They push through exhaustion instead of recovering strategically. They treat rest as laziness rather than as the biological necessity it actually is. The result is a life lived at 60% capacity, functional but never fully alive, productive but never truly excellent, present in the room but not really present. Let's go through each dimension and talk about how to actually optimize it. Physical energy begins with understanding your chronotype, your body's natural rhythm of alertness and rest. Some people are genuinely wired for peak cognitive performance in the early morning. Others hit their stride mid-morning or early afternoon. Still others do their best thinking in the evening. This isn't a character trait or a preference. It's biology. Your circadian rhythm is real and it's specific to you. The tragedy is that most people schedule their most important work at random, whenever it happens to fit into their calendar, rather than deliberately aligning their most demanding tasks with their natural peak performance windows. Here's a simple but powerful shift. Identify your peak 2 to 3 hours of cognitive performance each day and protect them ruthlessly. No meetings during these hours if you can avoid it. No email. No administrative tasks. No reactive work. These hours are reserved exclusively for your most important, most cognitively demanding, highest value work. This single change, aligning your best work with your best energy, can produce more meaningful output than any productivity system you'll ever try. Beyond timing, physical energy requires the fundamentals most people chronically underinvest in. Consistent, adequate sleep, not as a luxury, but as a non-negotiable performance requirement. Regular physical movement, not necessarily intense training, but consistent activity that keeps your body's systems functioning optimally. Nutrition that fuels rather than depletes. Whole, real food that provides sustained energy rather than the sharp spikes and crashes of processed alternatives. These aren't glamorous. They don't make for exciting content, but they are the non-negotiable foundation beneath every other form of performance. Mental energy is where modern life is creating a silent crisis that most people haven't fully recognized. Your brain consumes roughly 20% of your total energy, an extraordinary amount for an organ that represents about 2% of your body weight. And in today's environment, your mental energy is being depleted at unprecedented rates. Constant notifications, relentless decision-making, chronic multitasking, endless context switching. The average knowledge worker switches between tasks or applications every few minutes, each switch carrying a cognitive cost that accumulates throughout the day. By early afternoon, most people's mental energy is already significantly depleted, which is why so many people find themselves staring at their screen, unable to think clearly, reaching for stimulants, defaulting to low-value reactive tasks rather than meaningful creative work. The solution is deliberate mental energy management. Reduce decision fatigue by automating or systematizing routine choices. What you eat on weekdays, what you wear, what your morning sequence looks like. Every trivial decision you eliminate is mental energy preserved for decisions that actually matter. Protect deep work blocks where you work on a single meaningful task without interruption for extended periods. The research on this is unambiguous. Sustained, focused attention produces dramatically better results than the fragmented attention that characterizes most modern work. Even 90 minutes of genuine, deep focus twice a day will outperform 8 hours of distracted busyness. Take real breaks. Not the kind where you switch from work to scrolling. That's not recovery, that's just different stimulation. Real breaks involve genuine disengagement from cognitive demands. A walk outside, a few minutes of quiet, a brief physical activity, a conversation that has nothing to do with work. These breaks don't cost you productivity. They dramatically increase it by allowing your brain to consolidate, recover, and return to focus with renewed capacity. Emotional energy is perhaps the most consistently underestimated dimension of performance. And it has profound implications for everything from your relationships to your decision-making to your resilience under pressure. Your emotional state is not just a feeling. It's a cognitive environment. When your emotional energy is high, when you feel genuinely positive, connected, and grounded, your thinking is more creative, your problem-solving is more effective, your communication is more nuanced, and your resilience is stronger. When your emotional energy is depleted, when you're carrying unresolved conflict, chronic negativity, or persistent anxiety, even simple tasks feel heavier than they should. This means that the people you spend time with, the conversations you engage in, the media you consume, the environments you inhabit, all of these are either charging or draining your emotional battery. And most people have never done an honest audit of which is which. Conduct an energy audit. For 1 week, pay attention to how you feel before and after every significant interaction, activity, and environment in your life. Notice what gives you energy and what takes it. Notice which people leave you feeling more alive and which ones leave you feeling hollowed out. Notice which activities create momentum and which ones create inertia. Then make strategic decisions based on what you discover. Spend more time with the energizers. Create boundaries around the drains. Invest in the activities that genuinely restore you, not the ones that merely distract you from depletion. Because there's a crucial distinction between rest and recovery on one side and distraction on the other. Distraction, scrolling, passive consumption, numbing entertainment can feel like rest while actually preventing the deeper restoration your system needs. Real recovery involves genuine disengagement, genuine presence, genuine replenishment. Know the difference. Choose accordingly. Purposeful energy, the fuel that comes from meaning, is what allows extraordinary people to sustain extraordinary effort across years and decades. It's what separates people who burn out from people who keep going. Not because the ones who keep going have more discipline or more willpower, but because they're connected to something that makes the effort feel worth it. When your work is aligned with your values, when your daily actions connect to something larger than immediate reward, when you understand why you're doing what you're doing at the deepest level, you access a reservoir of energy that purely external motivation can never provide. This is why it matters to regularly reconnect with your purpose, not just once, but consistently as a practice. Ask yourself regularly, why does this work matter? Who does it serve? What becomes possible because I show up fully? How does what I do today connect to the life I'm building and the person I'm becoming? These questions aren't soft. They're the infrastructure of sustained high performance. Finally, remember that energy is contagious in both directions. When you walk into a room fully present, genuinely grounded, and positively energized, you influence the emotional climate of that room. You help others regulate. You create conditions where better thinking, better collaboration, and better results become possible. This is one of the most underappreciated forms of leadership, the leadership of your own energy. And it doesn't require a title or a position. It just requires the intention to show up every day as the most energized, most present, most fully alive version of yourself that your current circumstances allow. Manage your time well, but manage your energy first, because time without energy is just hours passing. Energy without time constraints still finds a way to create something remarkable. Chapter 12. Master the Art of Clear Communication. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. Every relationship you have, every single one, exists entirely inside communication. Not inside your feelings about someone, not inside your intentions toward them, not inside what you mean to say or wish you had said. Inside the actual words, the actual tone, the actual presence you bring to the actual exchange. Your career exists inside communication. Every opportunity that has come your way arrived through a conversation, a message, a moment where something you said landed in a way that opened a door. Every opportunity you've missed, if you're honest, probably had something to do with a message that didn't land, a conversation that went sideways, a moment where what you meant and what was received were two completely different things. Your closest relationships exist inside communication. The depth of any connection you have is almost perfectly correlated with the quality of the communication within it. The relationships that feel shallow feel that way because the communication is shallow. The relationships that feel irreplaceable feel that way because something real and honest is being exchanged. The quality of your communication is the quality of your life. Not approximately, precisely. And yet most people have never deliberately developed this skill. They communicate the way they learned to communicate growing up, picking up patterns, habits, and defaults from the environment around them. And then they spend decades wondering why they're being misunderstood, why their ideas aren't landing, why the relationships they want feel just out of reach. Here's the most important thing I can tell you about clear communication before we get into the how. The burden of clarity always sits with the speaker, never the listener. If someone misunderstands you, that's not their failure. It's yours. It means you didn't communicate clearly enough. This might feel uncomfortable. Most people prefer to believe that others simply aren't paying close enough attention, aren't smart enough to follow, aren't trying hard enough to understand. But accepting full responsibility for being understood is the mindset shift that transforms communicators from average to exceptional. Because the moment you take that responsibility seriously, the moment you stop assuming people understand what you mean and start ensuring they do, everything about how you communicate changes. Let's talk about the most common communication failures, because recognizing them in yourself is the first step to eliminating them. The first failure is vagueness. Most people communicate in abstractions and generalities when specificity is what actually creates understanding and action. We need to improve our performance tells someone almost nothing useful. We need to reduce our response time from 48 hours to 24 hours by the end of next month. Tells them exactly what's needed, measured against what's standard, by when. Specificity creates clarity. Clarity creates action. Vagueness creates confusion, misalignment, and the quiet frustration of people working hard towards slightly different targets. Train yourself to be specific. When you're about to say soon, ask yourself, what does soon actually mean? When you're about to say better, ask yourself, better measured how? When you're about to say we should improve, ask yourself, improve what specifically? By how much? By when? The second failure is leading with context instead of conclusion. Most people structure their communication like a mystery novel. They lay out all the background, all the nuance, all the supporting detail, and eventually, if you've stayed with them long enough, they reveal the point. But human attention doesn't work that way. People need to know why they're listening before they can properly process what they're hearing. Lead with your conclusion. State your main point first. Then provide the supporting information for the people who want it. This is sometimes called the pyramid principle. Broad conclusion at the top, supporting detail beneath. It feels counterintuitive because most of us were taught to build to our point. But in almost every real-world communication context, email, presentation, conversation, message, the person on the receiving end will engage more readily and retain more reliably when they know upfront what they're supposed to be taking away. The third failure is not listening, and I mean really not listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk, which is what most people are actually doing in most conversations, but genuinely, actively receiving what the other person is communicating. Real listening is rarer than you think. It requires that you be more interested in understanding than in being understood. It requires that you resist the pull to formulate your response while the other person is still talking. It requires genuine curiosity about what's being said, not just the surface content, but the emotional tone, the underlying concern, the thing being communicated beneath the words. When people feel truly listened to, not just heard, but genuinely received, they become more open, more honest, more collaborative. They share things they wouldn't otherwise share. They trust you with things they wouldn't otherwise trust. Real listening is one of the most powerful relationship-building tools available to any human being, and it costs nothing except genuine attention. Practice active listening by doing 3 things consistently. Give the speaker your undivided physical attention. No phone, no multitasking, no distraction. Ask genuine, clarifying questions that demonstrate you were actually following what they said. And before sharing your own perspective, briefly summarize what you understood them to say. This last step, the brief summary, is remarkably powerful because it catches misunderstandings immediately before they compound, and it signals to the speaker that you genuinely engaged with what they shared. The 4th failure is poor emotional calibration. Most people communicate the same way, regardless of who they're talking to and what emotional state that person is in. They deliver information when someone needs empathy. They problem solve when someone needs to feel heard. They argue with logic when someone is responding from emotion, which, by the way, is an almost perfectly reliable way to deepen a conflict rather than resolve it. The most effective communicators read the emotional landscape before choosing their approach. They ask themselves, what does this person need from this interaction right now? Do they need information, or do they need to feel understood? Do they need solutions, or do they need space to process? Do they need directness, or do they need gentleness? And then they adjust, not because they're being manipulative, but because they genuinely care about the outcome of the communication and they understand that the right message delivered in the wrong emotional register almost always misses. The 5th failure is hiding behind complexity. There's a temptation, particularly in professional environments, to use complicated language as a signal of intelligence or expertise. Long words, dense sentences, jargon that only insiders can decode. But complexity in communication almost never signals intelligence. It usually signals either unclear thinking or the insecurity of someone who needs to sound sophisticated rather than simply be understood. The clearest thinkers communicate simply, not because their ideas are simple, but because they've done the hard work of understanding their ideas clearly enough to explain them without complexity. If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough yet. Clarity of communication is a direct reflection of clarity of thought. Use the simplest word that accurately conveys your meaning. Write shorter sentences than you think you need to. Read your messages before sending them and remove every word that doesn't earn its place. Complexity is easy. Clarity is work. Do the work. The 6th failure, and perhaps the most consequential, is avoiding difficult conversations. Most relationship failures, most team breakdowns, most organizational dysfunction traces back to conversations that needed to happen and didn't. The feedback that would have helped someone grow but was never delivered. The boundary that needed to be stated but was hinted at instead. The concern that was felt for months but never spoken until it exploded into conflict. Difficult conversations aren't difficult because the content is complicated. They're difficult because they activate our fear of rejection, our discomfort with tension, our deep-seated desire to be liked. And so we avoid them. or we have them so poorly, so apologetically, so hedged with qualifications that the essential message gets completely lost. Here's a framework for difficult conversations that actually works. Prepare the content, not the script. Know what you need to communicate and why it matters, but don't try to script the exact words. Conversations are dynamic, and a memorized script will make you sound robotic and will collapse the moment the other person says something unexpected. Separate the person from the issue. Address behavior, impact, and what you need going forward, not character, worth, or permanent identity. When this happens, the impact is this, and what I need is this, is almost always more effective than you are, or you always, or you never. Create genuine two-way space. The goal of a difficult conversation is not to deliver a verdict. It's to reach mutual understanding and, ideally, a workable path forward. Ask questions. Invite their perspective. Be genuinely willing to hear something that changes your view. And finally, do it sooner rather than later. Difficult conversations get harder, not easier, with delay. The resentment builds, the pattern calcifies, the distance grows. What might have been a mildly uncomfortable 10-minute conversation in week 1 becomes a painful, high-stakes confrontation in month 6. Have the conversation. Have it kindly, have it clearly, have it with genuine care for the relationship. But have it. Because the life you want, the relationships, the career, the impact, lives on the other side of the communications you've been avoiding. Say what you mean what you say. Say it clearly, say it kindly, and say it now. Everything changes when you do. Chapter 13. Money is a tool, not a goal. Let's talk about money honestly, the way most people never do. Not the polished, sanitized version where everyone pretends they're completely rational and disciplined about finances. The real version, the one where money carries emotional weight that has almost nothing to do with numbers. Where how you feel about money was shaped before you were old enough to understand what money actually is. Where your financial behavior today is being driven by beliefs absorbed in childhood that you've never once consciously examined. Most people have a deeply complicated relationship with money. And that relationship, more than any investment strategy or income level, determines their financial reality. Some people grew up in environments where money was scarce and anxiety-producing, where the conversation around finances was always tense, where there was never quite enough, where security felt perpetually out of reach. Those people often carry one of two patterns into adulthood. They either grip money so tightly that spending on anything feels dangerous, even when they have genuine abundance, or they unconsciously recreate the scarcity they grew up with because some part of them doesn't believe they're allowed to have more. Others grew up watching money used as a measure of worth, where financial success was equated with personal value, where wealth was something to display rather than build. Those people often spend to signal status rather than investing to create freedom, and end up asset poor despite income that should have built genuine security years ago. Neither pattern serves you, and neither is your fault. But both are your responsibility to recognize and change. The foundational shift is this: money is not a goal. Money is a tool. What it builds: the freedom, the security, the options, the ability to be generous, the capacity to create. Those are the goals. Money itself is neutral. It amplifies whatever you already are. If you're generous, it makes you more generous. If you're anxious, it makes you more anxious. If you're clear about your values, it becomes a powerful instrument for living them fully. Get clear on what money is actually for in your life, specifically, concretely. Not financial security as an abstraction, but what financial security actually looks like for you, what it feels like, what it enables, what it protects. When money is connected to something meaningful rather than existing as a vague, anxiety-producing abstraction, your relationship with it becomes healthier, and your decisions around it become clearer. The core principle of building genuine financial stability is almost embarrassingly simple. Spend less than you earn and consistently invest the difference. That's the engine. Everything else is refinement. Yet most people violate this principle, not because they don't know it, but because lifestyle inflation silently devours every income increase before it can become wealth. Every raise gets absorbed by a slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer car, a slightly more expensive version of life. And the gap between income and wealth never closes, regardless of how much income grows. The antidote is equally simple. Pay yourself first. Before you pay for your lifestyle, before discretionary spending happens, automate a transfer to savings and investment. Make it non-negotiable, invisible, and consistent. Then build your life on what remains. Most people save what's left after spending. The financially intentional save before spending and live on what's left. That sequence reversal, compounded over decades, creates entirely different financial realities. Invest in yourself before anything else. The highest returning investment available to most people is not in the financial markets. It's in developing skills, knowledge, and capabilities that increase their earning potential. A skill that grows your income by even 10% annually compounds into something extraordinary over a career. And unlike market investments, it cannot be lost in a downturn. Understand the difference between assets and liabilities with genuine clarity. An asset puts money into your life. A liability takes money out. Build assets, minimize liabilities, and resist the cultural pressure to treat liabilities, expensive cars, status purchases, things that depreciate while draining cash, as achievements. Don't try to get rich quickly. Every shortcut in finance is actually a long cut dressed in exciting clothing. The people who build genuine, lasting wealth do it slowly, consistently, and without drama. They understand that time in the market matters more than timing the market. That consistency matters more than sophistication. That boring, repeated execution of sound principles outperforms exciting, complex strategies almost every time. Finally, and this matters more than any financial strategy, don't let money, stress consume the life you're trying to fund. The goal of building financial stability is to buy freedom. Freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom from the anxiety of perpetual financial fragility. If the pursuit of money is itself creating the anxiety it's supposed to solve, something has gone wrong in the relationship. Money is the tool. The life is the point. Keep that hierarchy clear and let it guide every financial decision you make. Chapter 14. Your health is your wealth. Here's a thought experiment worth taking seriously. Imagine achieving everything you've been working toward: the career, the financial security, the meaningful relationships, the life you've been building toward, and then not having the physical vitality to enjoy any of it, not because of bad luck or unavoidable circumstance, but because of choices made gradually, invisibly, across years of treating your body as an afterthought rather than a foundation. This isn't a hypothetical for millions of people, it's their reality. Your health is not one priority among many. It is the foundation beneath every other priority. Without it, nothing else functions at its full potential. With it, everything else becomes more possible, more energized, more focused, more present, more sustainable. The remarkable truth about health, one that most people don't fully absorb until something goes wrong, is that the vast majority of the conditions that devastate people in their later decades are not random misfortune. They are the accumulated consequence of daily choices made across years. The chronic disease didn't arrive suddenly. It was built slowly and invisibly through patterns of sleep deprivation, chronic stress, sedentary behavior, and nutrition that depleted rather than nourished, which means you have far more control over your long-term health outcomes than the healthcare system typically suggests. Not complete control, life is genuinely unpredictable, but profound influence, exercised through the unglamorous consistency of daily choices. The fundamentals are not complicated. Sleep is when your body repairs, your brain consolidates, your immune system strengthens. It is not optional, and it is not a sign of weakness. 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night is not a luxury. It is a biological requirement for optimal functioning. Protect it with the same seriousness you protect your most important commitments. Movement is medicine, not because exercise is pleasant, but because your body was designed to move and begins to deteriorate meaningfully when it doesn't. You don't need an elaborate fitness regimen. You need consistent, regular physical activity that elevates your heart rate and challenges your muscles. Find forms of movement you genuinely enjoy, because the best exercise is the one you'll actually do consistently across years, not just the one that looks most impressive for 3 weeks. Nutrition doesn't require a complicated protocol. Eat real food, the kind with one ingredient, the kind your great-grandparents would recognize. Minimize the processed, engineered, addictive products masquerading as food in most modern supermarkets. The 80-20 rule applies here too. Eat with genuine intention 80% of the time, and the other 20% won't derail you. Stress management is the pillar most people completely ignore until it's causing visible damage. Chronic stress isn't just unpleasant. It's physiologically destructive, contributing to cardiovascular disease, immune dysfunction, cognitive decline, and mental health deterioration. Develop genuine stress management practices, not as a luxury when life slows down, but as a non-negotiable daily maintenance of your most important asset. Here's what I want you to hold from this chapter. Investing in your health is not self-indulgence. It is the most strategically sound investment you can make. Every dollar spent on quality food, consistent movement, and preventive care returns multiples in energy, productivity, cognitive clarity, emotional resilience, and years of vibrant living. The time to make that investment is not when something goes wrong. It's now, in the ordinary, unremarkable days when health feels like background noise rather than urgent priority. Because the version of you that shows up fully for the life you're building, with genuine energy, genuine presence, genuine vitality, is built in those ordinary days. One consistent choice at a time. Take care of the foundation. Everything built on it will thank you. Chapter 15. Consistency beats intensity Every time we live in a world that worships intensity, we celebrate the person who works until midnight, the athlete who trains until they can't stand, the entrepreneur who sacrifices everything on the altar of ambition. We share their stories. We admire their dedication. We tell ourselves that's what it looks like to really want something. But here's what those stories almost never show you: the quiet, unglamorous, unremarkable consistency that preceded and sustained every extraordinary result you've ever admired. The overnight success that took 12 years, the athletic mastery built through thousands of training sessions nobody filmed, the creative work that emerged from a daily practice so boring it would make terrible content, the financial freedom that resulted from the same modest investment made every single month for 2 decades without drama or deviation. Intensity gets attention. Consistency gets results. And in the long run, in the only run that actually matters, consistency wins every single time. Here's why this is so important to understand at a deeper level than just show up every day. Intensity is inherently unsustainable. It burns bright and it burns out. It depends on motivation, on peak emotional states, on circumstances being just right. And motivation, as we've already established, is emotional. It fluctuates. It responds to your sleep quality, your stress levels, your recent wins and losses. You cannot build a reliable life on an unreliable fuel source. Consistency, on the other hand, is independent of motivation. When consistency becomes identity, when showing up is simply what you do, as automatic and non-negotiable as breathing, you no longer need to feel motivated to execute. The behavior happens regardless of the emotional weather. And it is this weather-independent execution, compounded across months and years, that produces the results that look extraordinary from the outside. Think about what happens in nature. A river doesn't carve a canyon through one dramatic surge of water. It carves it through the patient, consistent, relentless flow of water across thousands of years. The canyon is magnificent. The process was quiet. Your life compounds the same way. The secret to building genuine consistency, the kind that lasts, is to anchor it to something smaller than you think you need. Most people set consistency standards based on their best days. They decide they'll exercise for an hour, write 1,000 words, meditate for 30 minutes every day. And when a hard day arrives, when life intervenes, when the standard feels impossible, they skip entirely, and skipping once makes skipping twice easier, and a pattern begins to form in the wrong direction. Design your consistency floor around your worst days, not your best ones. What is the absolute minimum you can do to maintain the identity and keep the chain unbroken? 5 minutes of movement, 1 paragraph written, 3 deep breaths taken intentionally. On your hardest days, that minimum is enough, because the goal on hard days isn't excellence, it's continuity. It's keeping the thread unbroken so that when easier days return, you haven't lost the pattern, never missed twice. This is the rule that keeps consistency alive through the inevitable interruptions of real life. Missing once is human. Missing twice is the beginning of a new habit, and not the one you want. When you miss, your only job is to make tomorrow non-negotiable. Not perfect, just present. Track your consistency visibly. There is something quietly powerful about a physical record of your own follow-through. Marks on a calendar, a simple log, any visual representation of the chain you're building. It creates a momentum of its own, a reluctance to break what you built, a growing sense of identity as someone who follows through. Celebrate the process, not just the results. In a world obsessed with outcomes, the person who learns to find genuine satisfaction in showing up, in the practice itself, independent of where it leads, has found something most people never access. They've found the ability to be successful right now, in this moment, in this ordinary day of ordinary effort, because that's what consistency actually is. Not the dramatic commitment made once in a moment of inspiration. It's the quiet recommitment made every single day, especially on the days when nobody is watching, when results aren't visible, when the effort feels disproportionate to the evidence of progress. Those days, the invisible days of quiet follow-through, are where your future is being built. And one day, when you look back across the months and years, you'll see what consistency quietly constructed while you were simply showing up. Something extraordinary, built from ordinary days, one at a time.